Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm 32 and I live in Kentucky. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. If you'd told me 2 years ago that my life would blow up over something as dumb as a guy best friend, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. Let me start at the beginning though, because you need to understand how this all unfolded. I met Todd when I was 27. He was this quiet, kinda awkward guy I worked with at this small logistics company. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't notice him at first. I was dating this flashy bartender, and Todd was the guy who'd show up to meetings in the same 3 button-downs, all a little wrinkled, with a tie that never matched. But then one day, he stayed late to help me fix some reports that I'd messed up on. That turned into this late-night coffee run, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to seeing him more than anyone else at work. He wasn't like the guys I was used to. Todd was steady, dependable, the kind of guy who'd drive me home when my car broke down without making me feel like I owed him something. We started dating a few months later, and it moved fast. By the time I turned 29, we were living together in this little apartment downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I handled most of the decorating. I've always been into that kind of thing, and Todd was fine with whatever I wanted. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag. He didn't push back on anything, like he wouldn't even tell me if he hated something. But at the time I thought, wow, what a catch. For a while things were good. We had our routines. Todd worked as an analyst, and I was managing accounts at this local office. We'd spend our evenings binge-watching whatever was popular or hitting up this little pizza place near us. On weekends we'd hang out with friends or just do our own thing. It wasn't perfect, but it felt comfortable, you know? Like we were building something solid. But here's the thing about me. I get bored easily. Todd's the kind of guy who likes predictability. He'd plan his lunches a week in advance, for crying out loud. I tried to get him to be more spontaneous, like, let's go on a random road trip, or just skip work and hit a brewery for the day. But he'd always have some excuse. Money, work deadlines, whatever. And at first I told myself, it's okay, he's just responsible. But after a while, it started to feel stifling. Around this time, my best friend Jake started coming around more. Jake and I had been tight since college. He was the life of the party, the guy everyone wanted to hang out with. Todd never said much about him, but I could tell he wasn't a fan. And honestly, I didn't care. Jake and I had a history. Not romantically or anything, but he just got me in a way Todd didn't. He was fun, impulsive, the kind of person who'd suggest karaoke at midnight on a Tuesday and actually make it happen. I started spending more time with Jake, grabbing drinks after work, crashing at his place when I didn't feel like dealing with Todd's predictable routines. Todd didn't say much about it at first, but I could feel him pulling away. He stopped asking about my day, started going to bed earlier without me. And yeah, I noticed, but I figured he'd get over it. I mean, it wasn't like I was doing anything wrong. Jake was just a friend. Todd knew that. Or, at least I thought he did. Things between Todd and me started to shift in these small, almost unnoticeable ways. At first, it was just little stuff. He stopped waiting up for me when I was out with Jake. Before, even if I got home at midnight, Todd would be on the couch half asleep with a movie playing. But one night, I came in, and the apartment was pitch dark. He'd left a note on the counter that just said, "Had an early meeting. Night." It wasn't like Todd to not wait up. That was his thing, you know? Being there. But I told myself he's just tired, no big deal. Except it started becoming a pattern. I'd come home from a happy hour with Jake or a late dinner, and Todd would already be in bed. He stopped asking where I was going or who I was with. Part of me was relieved because, let's be real, it felt like he was being clingy before. But another part of me wondered if he was mad and just not saying it. Todd wasn't the type to yell or blow up. If he was upset, he'd go quiet. And let me tell you, his silence was louder than any argument. Weirdly, I think his distance made me pull away more. I didn't even notice I was doing it at first. I started spending less time at home, filling my calendar with plans that didn't include Todd. Lunch with coworkers, gym classes, random trips to the mall with Jake. The thing is, Todd never complained. He didn't ask me to stay or tell me he missed me. He'd just say, "Okay, have fun," and go back to whatever he was doing. And that pissed me off more than it should have. Like, why wasn't he fighting for my attention? Did he not care anymore? One night, we had this awkward dinner that really stuck with me. I'd cooked, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and some garlic bread. But the whole time, it felt like we were strangers sitting across from each other. I told him about my day, about this annoying client I had to deal with, and he just nodded like he wasn't even listening. Finally, I snapped. "Are you even paying attention?" I asked, slamming my fork down. He looked up, startled, and said, "Yeah, I'm listening. You were talking about work." "That's all you're gonna say? No advice, no reaction, nothing?" "What do you want me to say, Lauren?" he asked, his voice calm but tired. "You've been so checked out lately, I didn't think you even wanted to talk to me." That shut me up. Not because he was wrong, but because it hit a nerve. I didn't want to admit it, but I had been checked out. I felt like we were just existing in the same space. I told myself it was because he was boring, predictable, too much of a homebody. But deep down, I knew I wasn't exactly making an effort either. Still, instead of owning up to it, I just rolled my eyes and said, "Whatever," and we finished dinner in silence. Things got worse after that. Todd started spending more time in his office at home, claiming he had extra work to do. I didn't ask if that was true. I didn't really care. I was too busy scrolling through Instagram, checking out Jake's latest posts. He had this way of making his life look so fun and carefree, and I couldn't help but feel like I was missing out. Meanwhile, Todd's idea of excitement was getting takeout from a new Thai place down the street. Then there was the night Todd asked if I wanted to go on a date. Like an actual date. I almost laughed because it felt so forced. He suggested this quiet little steakhouse we'd gone to a few times before, and I just shrugged and said, "Sure, if you want." When the night came, I wasn't even in the mood. Jake had been texting me all day, sending memes and updates about his latest Tinder match, and honestly, I'd rather have been with him. But I went, mostly because I didn't want Todd to accuse me of bailing. The date was a disaster. Todd tried to make small talk, asking about work, my plans for the weekend, but I gave short, one-word answers. I don't know why. It's not like I was mad at him. I just didn't feel like talking. He finally gave up, and we ate in near silence. At one point, he looked at me and said, "Do you even want to be here?" "Of course I do," I lied, forcing a smile. But the truth was I didn't, and I think he knew it because he just nodded and went back to eating. When we got home, he went straight to bed without saying a word. I stayed up, scrolling through my phone and wondering if this was just how relationships went after a few years. Comfortable, predictable, boring. The thing is, I didn't want to break up with Todd. I didn't want to be alone. I just wanted more. More excitement, more attention, more something. And Jake? He gave me that. He made me feel like the most interesting person in the room, just a bit like my jokes were actually funny, and my stories were worth hearing. Looking back, I can see how things were unraveling, but at the time, I didn't think it was that serious. I figured Todd and I were just going through a rough patch, and we'd get over it. But now, I realized that was the beginning of the end. The night it all blew up started like any other. Todd was in his office, and I was sprawled out on the couch, scrolling through Instagram. Jake had been posting stories from a concert he was at, and I couldn't stop watching. He'd tagged me in a couple of posts with captions like, "Wish you were here," and I smiled every time. It felt nice to be wanted, you know? I don't even remember why I got up to go into Todd's office, but when I did, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. He wasn't working like he said he was. He was sitting there, staring at his screen, looking at me. Or, more specifically, my Instagram. I watched as he scrolled through my photos, pausing on one I'd posted a few weeks ago of Jake and me at brunch. Todd didn't say anything. He just sat there, his face completely blank, his hand gripping the mouse so tightly I thought it might break. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He jumped and quickly minimized the screen, but it was too late. I'd seen enough. "Were you stalking my Instagram?" I pressed, crossing my arms. "Stalking?" he repeated, his voice cold. "I wouldn't call it that. Just trying to figure out where my wife's head is at, since she clearly spends more time with him than she does with me." That hit me like a slap, but instead of apologizing or trying to explain, I got defensive. "Jake is my friend, Todd. How many times do I have to tell you that?" He stood up, finally looking me in the eye. Friend? Lauren, you spend more time with him than you do with me. You post pictures with him, you laugh at his jokes, you go out to dinners and concerts and who knows what else. Do you even realize how that looks? I rolled my eyes because of course he'd blow this out of proportion. It looks like I have a life outside of this apartment. Sorry I'm not sitting at home waiting for you to finish work all the time. That's not what this is about, and you know it, he said, his voice rising. You're crossing lines, Lauren, and you don't even care. That made me snap. What lines, Todd? Hanging out with a friend? Laughing at his jokes? God forbid I have fun for once in my life. Todd shook his head, his jaw tightening. You don't get it. You're disrespecting me, Lauren, our marriage, and you're too selfish to see it. That word selfish lit a fire under me. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy? Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I wouldn't need to hang out with Jake to feel alive. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Not because they weren't true, but because of the way Todd's face fell. He looked at me like I'd just kicked him in the gut, and for a split second, I felt a twinge of guilt. But I buried it under my anger because, in my mind, this was his fault. If he'd just loosen up, be more fun, maybe I wouldn't have to go looking for it elsewhere. Todd didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he turned back to his desk, sat down, and said quietly, Do whatever you want, Lauren. Clearly, you're going to anyway. That should have been the end of it, but I couldn't let it go. I hated how calm he was, how he acted like he was taking the high road. You know what your problem is, Todd? You expect me to sit here and be this perfect little wife while you put zero effort into making me happy. He turned to me then, his eyes blazing. Zero effort? Are you kidding me? I've been bending over backward trying to make this work, but you're so wrapped up in yourself, you don't even notice. Maybe if you weren't so focused on work all the time, I'd notice. I shot back. Work is the only thing holding this house together, he snapped. Because God knows you're not contributing much else. That one stung. He knew I'd been struggling at my job, barely keeping up with deadlines and getting passed over for a promotion I'd been counting on. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let him see me cry. Wow, I said, my voice trembling. Good to know how you really feel. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. Lauren, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of feeling like I'm competing with Jake for my own wife's attention. I'm tired of walking on eggshells because I don't know what version of you I'm coming home to. And I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. I wanted to argue, to throw something back at him, but for once I didn't have anything to say. Because deep down, I knew he was right. But admitting that wasn't an option. So instead, I muttered, whatever, and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. That night, I stayed up texting Jake, telling him everything Todd had said. He replied with his usual jokes, calling Todd boring and jealous, and for a while, it made me feel better. But when I finally crawled into bed, Todd was already asleep, his back turned to me. And for the first time, I felt like maybe we'd crossed a line we couldn't come back from. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Todd was already gone, which wasn't unusual, but there was something different about it this time. Normally he'd leave a note or at least text me something about his schedule for the day. This time, nothing. I brushed it off at first, telling myself he was probably just busy. But as the day went on, that nagging feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. By lunch, I hadn't heard a word from him. I texted, "Hey, everything okay?" But all I got back was, "Fine." Short, cold. Not like him at all. That's when I started to panic a little. Todd wasn't the type to hold a grudge, at least not openly. He was more of a passive-aggressive, let's pretend everything's fine kind of guy. But this felt different. It felt final, somehow. When he came home that evening, he barely looked at me. He dropped his bag by the door, went straight to the kitchen to grab a drink, and sat on the couch like I wasn't even there. Rough day? I asked, trying to sound casual. Something like that, he muttered, flipping through channels on the TV. I stood there unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to apologize, to tell him I didn't mean the things I'd said the night before. But the other part, the stubborn, prideful part, refused to back down. Instead, I sat next to him, scrolling on my phone, pretending everything was fine. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Todd turned off the TV and looked at me. "We need to talk." Those 4 words hit me like a ton of bricks. "About what?" I asked, even though I already knew. He sighed, rubbing his temples like he was trying to summon the patience to deal with me. "About us. About where this is going." "Where what is going?" I shot back, already on the defensive. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "Whatever this is. Because it doesn't feel like a marriage anymore, Lauren. It feels like 2 people living in the same house, pretending they don't hate each other." "I don't hate you," I said quickly, but it came out more like an excuse than a reassurance. "Well, you sure don't act like you love me," he said, his voice flat but laced with hurt. "You spend all your time with Jake, you blow me off when I try to make plans, and when we do talk, it's like you can't wait for the conversation to be over. Do you even want to be married to me?" That question hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. I could have said yes. Could have told him I was just going through a phase or that I'd been feeling off lately, but instead, I deflected. "You're overreacting. Just because I have a life outside of you doesn't mean I don't want to be with you." "A life outside of me?" he repeated, his voice rising for the first time. "Lauren, you've built your whole world around Jake. You don't even see it, do you?" "Jake's my friend," I said for what felt like the millionth time. "You're making this into something it's not. And you're making me into the bad guy for not being okay with it," he shot back. "Do you even hear yourself? You're gaslighting me, Lauren. You're trying to make me feel crazy for being upset about something that any husband would be upset about." That word, gaslighting, set me off. "Oh, so now I'm some kind of manipulative villain? Give me a break, Todd. You're just insecure because Jake's fun, and you're not." The second I said it, I knew I'd crossed a line. Todd's face hardened, and he stood up, looking down at me like he didn't even recognize me. "You know what, Lauren? Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not fun. But at least I'm not disrespectful. At least I'm not selfish." "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I'm selfish because I want to have a friend? Because I want to have a life outside of being your wife?" "No. You're selfish because you don't care how your actions affect anyone but yourself," he said, his voice steady but cold. "You don't care how they affect me. You don't care how they make me feel. You just do whatever you want and expect me to be okay with it." I stared at him, my mind racing for a comeback, but for once, I had nothing. He was right, and I hated that he was right. But instead of admitting it, I just sat there in silence, my arms crossed like a petulant child. Todd sighed again, like he was exhausted just from looking at me. "I can't keep doing this, Lauren. I've been trying to hold on, trying to make this work, but you've checked out, and I'm done being the only one fighting for this." "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "I don't know," he admitted, and that scared me more than if he'd said yes. "But I know I can't keep living like this. Something has to change." He grabbed his bag and headed toward the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, stunned and silent. For the first time, I realized that Todd wasn't going to wait around forever. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I cared enough to stop him. After that fight, things between Todd and me weren't just tense, they were icy. We barely spoke unless it was about bills or groceries, and even then, it felt like we were 2 co-workers trying to manage a shared workload instead of a married couple. He didn't bring up Jake again, but I could tell he was still thinking about it. I'd catch him giving me these looks, like he was trying to decide whether to say something or just let it go. He always chose the latter, which annoyed me even more. If you're mad, say something, right? Don't just sit there stewing. But here's the thing. I didn't stop hanging out with Jake. In fact, I leaned into it harder. Todd had basically accused me of prioritizing Jake over him, and part of me thought, well, if that's what you think, I might as well give you a reason. I knew it was petty, but I felt like I deserved to be happy, even if Todd wasn't making an effort to make me feel that way. Jake was my escape. He made me laugh, made me feel interesting and fun. With him, I didn't feel like the nagging wife or the bad employee who couldn't get her act together. One night, Jake invited me to a party at his friend's house. I didn't even bother telling Todd. I figured he wouldn't care. Or worse, he'd care too much, and we'd have another fight. So I just said I was going out and left it at that. The party was everything I needed it to be. Loud music, good drinks, and people who didn't expect anything from me. Jake was in his element, cracking jokes and dancing like he didn't have a care in the world. For a few hours, I forgot all about Todd and our problems. But then Jake did something that caught me off guard. We were sitting on the couch, surrounded by people, and he leaned in close, his arm brushing against mine. "You know," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear, "I don't get why you're still with Todd. You deserve better." I laughed it off, but inside my stomach flipped. "Don't start," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm serious," he pressed. "You're too good for him. He doesn't appreciate you." The words hung in the air, and for a second, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Todd was a good guy who just didn't know how to show it. But another part of me, the part that felt invisible and unimportant at home, wanted to believe him. "It's complicated," I finally said, taking a sip of my drink. Jake didn't push it, but the seed had been planted. On the drive home that night, his words kept playing in my head. Did I deserve better? Was I wasting my time trying to fix something that was beyond saving? By the time I got home, I felt more confused than ever. Todd was in the living room when I walked in, his laptop open on the coffee table. He looked up when he heard the door, his face unreadable. "You're late," he said, his tone neutral, but not exactly friendly. "It wasn't a school night," I shot back, kicking off my shoes. "Why does it matter?" He closed his laptop and leaned back on the couch, crossing his arms. "You didn't even tell me where you were going." "Didn't know I needed permission," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Lauren," he said, sighing, "I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for respect. But clearly, that's too much to ask." "Respect?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're the one who's been acting like I'm some villain in this marriage. Maybe if you treated me like your wife instead of your roommate, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Todd shook his head, his jaw tightening. "I don't even know who you are anymore. Maybe if you paid attention, you'd figure it out." I snapped. The argument escalated from there, both of us throwing out every grievance we'd been holding on to for months. He accused me of being selfish, of putting my own happiness above our marriage. I accused him of being boring, distant, and emotionally unavailable. By the end of it, we were both exhausted, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like strangers. "I can't do this anymore," Todd said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "It means I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't want to fight for me," he said, standing up. "If Jake makes you so happy, maybe you should be with him." His words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I just stared at him, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But another part of me, the part that had been leaning on Jake for everything Todd wasn't giving me, knew he wasn't entirely wrong. Todd went to bed after that, leaving me alone in the living room with my thoughts. For the first time, I wondered if maybe we'd reached the point of no return. The morning after that argument, I woke up to an empty bed. At first, I thought Todd had already left for work, but when I checked my phone, I saw a text from him. "I need some space. Don't call me. I'll be back when I'm ready to talk." My stomach dropped. Todd wasn't the type to storm off or make dramatic exits. If he was leaving, even temporarily, it meant something had seriously shifted. I sat there staring at the message, my emotions all over the place. Part of me was angry. How dare he just leave without talking it through? But another part of me was scared. What if this wasn't just a cooling off period? What if he was really done? I wanted to call him, to demand an explanation, but his text made it clear he wasn't interested in hearing from me. So instead, I did what I always did when I was upset. I texted Jake. Jake was over in less than an hour, coffee in hand like some kind of savior. "What happened?" he asked as he handed me the cup and sat down on the couch beside me. "Todd left," I said, keeping my tone neutral, like it didn't bother me. "He said he needs space or whatever." Jake raised an eyebrow. "So what does that mean? Are you guys like on a break?" "I don't know," I admitted. "He's being dramatic. He'll probably be back in a day or two." Jake smirked. "Honestly, you're better off without him." I laughed, but it was forced. "Don't start." "I'm serious, Lauren," he said, his tone softening. "You deserve someone who actually values you, someone who doesn't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. I didn't respond right away because, in that moment, it felt like he was saying all the things I'd been wishing Todd would say. And it hit me hard that maybe Jake wasn't just my friend. Or maybe he was, but I was starting to want him to be something more. The next couple of days were a blur. Todd didn't come home, and he didn't text me either. At first, I tried to act like I didn't care. I went about my day, hung out with Jake, and told myself Todd was just being immature. But as the hours turned into days, the silence started to get to me. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping for some sign that he still cared. But there was nothing. By the third day, my patience was wearing thin. Jake came over that night with a bottle of wine, and we sat on the couch, watching some mindless TV show. I wasn't really paying attention, though. My mind was on Todd, wondering where he was, what he was thinking, and whether he was coming back. Jake must have noticed because he leaned over and said, "You're better than this, you know. Sitting around waiting for him. You don't need him, Lauren." I turned to look at him, my heart racing. "What are you saying?" He hesitated, like he was deciding whether to cross a line. Then he shrugged and said, "I'm saying you deserve to be happy. And I think you know Todd isn't the one who's gonna make that happen." I didn't respond right away, but something about the way he looked at me in that moment made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't some big romantic moment. It just happened, and for a few seconds I let myself get lost in it. But then reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I pulled back, my face burning. "I can't," I said, standing up and putting some space between us. "This isn't right." Jake looked hurt, but he nodded. "I get it," he said quietly. "But you need to figure out what you want, Lauren. You can't keep living in this limbo." He left after that, and I was left alone with my thoughts. The kiss had been brief, but it felt like a point of no return. I knew I'd crossed a line, not just with Jake, but with Todd too. And as much as I wanted to blame Todd for everything, I couldn't deny that I was the one who'd taken things too far. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the door, hoping Todd would walk through it and somehow fix everything. But he didn't. And for the first time, I started to wonder if maybe he never would. A week passed before I heard from Todd again. 7 full days of silence, and I was losing my mind. I went through every emotion: anger, guilt, sadness, confusion. Every time I thought about calling him, I'd talk myself out of it, telling myself that he should be the one to reach out. After all, he was the one who left. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I wanted him to come back, because I missed him, or because I didn't want to deal with the fallout of him being gone for good. When he finally came home, it was late in the evening. I was sitting on the couch, half watching some reality show, when I heard his key in the lock. My heart leapt, but I forced myself to stay calm. He walked in, looking tired and disheveled, carrying a small duffel bag. He didn't say anything at first, just set the bag down and stood there, looking at me like he wasn't sure how to start. "You're back," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "For now," he replied, his voice flat. That "for now" hit me like a brick, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I crossed my arms and said, "So, are you going to tell me where you've been? Or is this some kind of dramatic re-entrance?" Todd sighed and sat down in the armchair across from me. "I've been staying with my brother," he said. "I needed time to think." "About what?" I asked, even though I had a pretty good idea. "About us. About whether this is even worth trying to save." The room went silent. I could feel my throat tightening, but I forced myself to stay calm. "So, what did you decide?" I asked, trying to sound indifferent. Todd leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I decided that I can't do this anymore, Lauren. Not like this. I love you, but I don't feel loved back. I feel like I'm in a marriage by myself, while you're out living a separate life. And the worst part is, I don't even think you realize how much you've hurt me." His words stung, but instead of apologizing, I got defensive. "Oh, so this is all my fault now? You're the one who checked out first, Todd. You stopped trying. You made me feel like I wasn't even here." "And what about Jake?" He shot back. "How do you think it feels to see my wife posting pictures with another man, spending all her time with him, acting like he's the one she's married to?" "He's my friend," I said. but the words felt hollow. Especially after what had happened with Jake. I hadn't told Todd about the kiss, and I had no intention of doing so. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" Todd said, his voice rising for the first time. "You've been disrespecting me and our marriage for months, Lauren. And you don't even see it. Or maybe you do, and you just don't care." "That's not fair," I snapped. "I've been trying to make this work, but you've been so checked out, I don't even know how to reach you anymore." Todd shook his head. "Trying? Is that what you call it? Running off with Jake every chance you get? Ignoring me every time I try to talk to you? Making me feel like a third wheel in my own marriage?" I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong, that he was just being insecure and jealous. But another part of me knew he wasn't entirely wrong. And that scared me. Finally, Todd stood up and said, "I didn't come back to fight, Lauren. I came back to tell you that I'm done. I can't keep doing this, I want a divorce." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I stared at him, stunned. Divorce? It wasn't like the thought hadn't crossed my mind, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel real in a way I wasn't prepared for. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been more serious," he replied. "I love you, Lauren. I really do, but I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me. And I don't think you even respect yourself." That last part hit harder than I expected, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're just walking away?" "I've already been gone, Lauren," he said quietly. "You just didn't notice." With that, he grabbed his bag and headed for the door. I didn't try to stop him. I just sat there, frozen, listening to the sound of the door closing behind him. That night, I stayed up thinking about everything. About Todd, about Jake, about all the choices I'd made that had led to this moment. I wanted to blame Todd for leaving, for not fighting harder. I wanted to blame Jake for crossing lines and making me question everything. But the truth was, I knew this was on me. I had been selfish, impulsive, and careless, with the one person who had always tried to make me happy. But here's the thing. I didn't feel regret. Not really. I felt sad that it had ended this way, that I'd lost someone who genuinely cared about me. But I didn't regret the choices I'd made. In my mind, I'd done what I needed to do to find happiness, even if it had blown up in my face. And maybe that made me the villain in Todd's story. But at least I was being honest about who I was. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.